So a brand new book gives extraordinary insight into President Trump's 2024 presidential comeback. It is told by journalists who covered the campaign from start to finish, and of course includes that night, that disastrous debate that was a tipping point in the course of the election.
We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. And the situation is and we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
Okay, so after that moment, back in the room where both sides were watching, then President Biden's chief of staff reportedly watched that first answer and stood up and announced, "We're effed." You can fill in the blanks. Just one of many key moments in really one of the most dramatic campaigns that we have ever witnessed. 2024, how Trump retook the White House and the Democrats lost America. Co-author Isaac Arnsdorf joins me now. Isaac, great to have you with us. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
When you go back to that night, you were covering this from the Trump side. What do you uncover in 2024 about how quickly they understood? Because we see how Ron Klain, how quickly he understood what was happening that night.
Yeah, there's a great scene in the book where Biden starts talking and they're watching in their private room and they freak out because they think the TV's not working because they can't hear anything. And they realize it's not a problem with the TV, it's a problem with Biden. And they can't believe, this is the moment that everyone thought might happen, they imagined, they hoped for, and they just couldn't believe it was actually happening to them. But pretty soon, that turned to realizing they brought in printers and printed out new talking points because they knew they had to say the Democrats are stuck with him. Even before that debate was over, they started to reckon with that concern that, hang on, what if they yank him? The ballots aren't printed yet.
So on the other side, on the Trump team, because we covered that debate live and we had the same reaction, off camera, because we're sitting there and everybody's focused on the debate, that this was unraveling really fast. What was the Trump side reaction? Because I think the current president had mixed feelings about not running potentially against Biden.
Actually, the word that when Trump came off the stage, the word that he kept using was that it was sad, that he actually seemed to feel for Biden in that moment. It wasn't that, you showed the clip of him saying, I don't know what he said, but he actually seemed to sort of relate to it and feel sad for him. Sad was the word that he was using most often. And he eventually turned on his advisors because they had assured him, they had encouraged him to do that early debate and assured him that Biden wasn't going to go anywhere. And when Biden did withdraw, and now he felt like he beat Biden, and now he had to run a whole new campaign against someone else. He really had a hard time dealing with that.
Yeah, clear frustration, as you guys write about, that he had to sort of run against two people, and that maybe he shouldn't have done that early debate. And there's a lot in there about why the Biden team wanted him and pushed him to do an early debate. What's your sense? There's a lot about, the reporters who covered this race and not revealing what was being seen and understood about Biden's cognitive abilities. And we see the doctor today refusing to talk.
So the miscalculation that Biden's team made is the way that they saw it. He could do the job in the Situation Room. He could do the job in the Oval Office. And he just couldn't communicate that well, right? He didn't speak as well as he used to. He didn't debate as well as he used to. That's what they were always saying. And they thought, actually, they wanted him to do the early debate because they thought if the American public could see him the way that they saw him, they would be reassured. What they miscalculated was that communicating is the president's #1 job, and Trump has always understood this. If you can't communicate about your agenda and your leadership, you can't do the job. So this distinction that Biden's team was trying to make between doing the job and communicating about the job, there is no distinction.
Yeah. I mean, they were stuck. He was determined to run again. And so, they had to make the best of it at that point, I guess. With regard to, you were in Butler, and we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of July 13th, that day. I don't think anybody would forget where they were that moment you were on the ground there. There's the Iranian threat, and I think we have we have a soundbite about the Iranian threat. Let's take a look at that. It's a full screen, excuse me. Here we go. U.S. intelligence suggested that Iran had multiple kill teams inside the U.S. It was possible the regime hired drug cartels to carry out the murders. So tell me the intersection of the Iran threat and what happened in Butler. We didn't ever learn much about Thomas Crooks.
So we have to be super clear. There's no evidence of any connection between either of the assassination attempts and Iran's desire to assassinate Trump. But obviously, both things were going on at the same time. And so from the perspective of the Trump campaign, they're thinking, wait a minute, 2 guys tried to kill us, and you're telling us that Iran has people trying to kill us? Like, is it crazy to think that there might be something going on here? And that really changed the way the campaign was operating in the last few months because of those security concerns.
There's so much in here. This is a real page turner, and I can't wait to read the rest of it. Isaac Arnsdorf, thank you. The book is called 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and Democrats Lost America. Great to have you with us. Hope you'll come back. Thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.